In the old days on YouTube, there was a type of video called book versus show, or book to show comparison. And those videos have obviously disappeared because at one point, the TV show, the TV adaptation, Game of Thrones, they ran out of books to work with, and the TV show kept going. But in this case, in the context of discussing the conclusion of the grand overarching plot of the relationship between the White Walkers and humanity on the continent of Westeros, I think it is worthwhile to take a moment and go back and consider what the book set out for us, what it is we're supposed to have known and understood about who the White Walkers were and why they invaded the realms of men, as it's put in the show. George R.R. Martin has said many times in interviews, and it's obvious from his work, he is not interested in creating an evil Dark Lord, a villain who is evil for the sake of being evil. Now, it's interesting to point out, he doesn't perfectly live up to his own standards in the books. You can actually pick out examples of individual people and even individual cultures out in Essos. There are a few that seem to be evil for the sake of being evil. He doesn't always live up to his own standards. But it's very clear in the book that quite a lot of time was taken so that we could sympathize with the motivations even of the great others, even of the White Walkers coming from beyond the wall. Now, if you've only watched the TV show and haven't read the books, you will remember that in the first 3 years, quite a lot of time and effort was put into showing you. There is a man called Craster. Craster lives at a special place called Craster's Keep, north of the wall. And the most shocking thing about Craster is not that he gives his infant children to the others, is not that he gives his infant sons, his newborn boys, to this, miraculous and magical different species with blue skin. What's amazing about it is that the leader of the Night's Watch knows and permits it and doesn't regard it as a bad thing. So the Night's Watch has known about this and has always known. And then sort of ... The rest is left up to us to fill in the blanks. We are told that many, many centuries ago, so many centuries ago that nobody knows how many years it was, perhaps thousands of years, there was a peace treaty between the others and human beings. And they put up this wall. Now, in the books, it only gives credit to the human side for creating the ice wall. But of the two parties who created this treaty, you tell me which side is more likely to have the means to create an enormous barrier made out of ice. It seems very likely that the two sides cooperated, or even that the bulk of the construction, just creating the huge mass of ice, was actually done by the others, and then maybe human beings put the staircases and castles and other fixings and details into the ice wall. But at the end of the long night, the war between humans and the others, there was a pact, there was a treaty. Now this, again, implicitly confirms something we're explicitly shown right at the beginning of the books, which is that the others have language. They speak. They reason. They're not mindless zombies themselves, right? Not in the books. They have motivations. And the pact, the peace treaty created, obviously wasn't just to separate the two civilizations, separate the others from humanity. The others remained dependent on humanity because humanity had to provide them with a certain number of babies per year, right? And the Night's Watch has always known about this and has always participated in it, and so on and so forth, right? So one of the first moments of direct conflict between the others and the Night's Watch is when a zombie rises up within Castle Black to kill J.R.R. Mormont, the leader of the Night's Watch. And Jon Snow lights the zombie on fire, and the zombie bursts into flames. By the way, in tonight's episode, inexplicably, the zombies seemed a lot less flammable than they were in earlier seasons. We don't have any explanation for that. They seem to have become stronger, faster, and less susceptible to fire with each passing season. So they're really an unstoppable superhuman force at this point, as opposed to being shambling and perhaps somewhat weak, somewhat enfeebled by death. But anyway, this is a mere detail. So, why? What's happened? Well, the Night's Watch and the realms of men, it seems they have not been living up to their side of the bargain. With the exception of Craster handing his sons over, to the great others, it seems that, the old traditions of the Night's Watch have been forgotten or neglected or failed in. It seems that the others are in a position of having to come south because humans haven't been keeping up their side of the treaty. Now, the real plot twist for readers of the books, the plot twist that was revealed in the show and has not been revealed in the books yet, was who or what created this bizarre situation in the first place. Why was there a kind of asymmetrical symbiosis between humans and the great others? Well, it turns out that there's yet another species of, bipeds, but who are not quite human, living on the continent. The original indigenous people of the continent are the children of the forest. And the children of the forest were being pushed to extinction by the incoming colonization of the continent, going from east to west by human beings. Now, all of this, of course, is not so different from the history of New Mexico, which is where George R.R. Martin lives. There's a obvious question to what extent many of these concepts, including the Great Wall and the persecution of indigenous people to extinction and so on and so forth, to what extent some of these things, the conflict between the first men and the later settlers, and then the children of the forest being the real indigenous people, you wonder to what extent that reflects political and ethical concerns that surround George R.R. Martin in his own society and the history of the preceding centuries in his own society. But with that aside, the plot twist we faced in the show that hasn't been revealed in the books yet is that the reason why the great others exist is that they were created like a sort of biological weapon to wipe out humanity or push back humanity so that the children of the forest could continue to survive, right? But that's not what happened, right? At the end of the Long Night, at the end of the last war, instead what happened was a treaty whereby the children of the forest and the others together, both, would only live north of the ice wall. Human beings would live south. And as I say, the others continued to depend on human beings. So, look, people who are saying this episode is a masterpiece, well, if what you signed up for was meaningless spectacle for the sake of meaningless spectacle, if what you signed up for was a battle between good and evil, life and death, where the side representing evil is just evil for the sake of being evil, they just want death for the sake of death, they just want to... That's not what I signed up for. I signed up for something that's really politically sophisticated, meaningful, has some kind of philosophical content to it as well. I signed up to be at, one of those rare junctions in history where pop culture and great literature and, politics and philosophy all happen to come together at the same point, at the same time, in the same story. That's what the books have offered us, or at least that's what the books have promised us. The books are not yet finished. But it's impossible to believe that this is the direction the books are going in. If this really was the conclusion the books were working towards, then again, simply ask yourself, why did all that stuff happen with Craster at Craster's Keep? Why did it matter so much to reveal to us that, the others require human babies to continue their culture? And what sense would it make for the others to try to kill all of humanity? They themselves are human, and they rely on humans to give birth to and raise children and offer them in a religious ceremony to the others, so that the others then raise those human babies as members of their own culture, their own civilization. And then, of course, there's the question of what was the agenda of the Children of the Forest. In the TV show, the Children of the Forest just disappeared conveniently at a certain point, but presumably the Children of the Forest want their land back, or at least 10% of their land back, or they'd like to survive too. And none of that's ever dealt with. Another kind of large-scale overarching question here. Who is the Red God, or what is the Red God? It's just ridiculous, the position we're left in here, partly because of the way Stannis' storyline ended. But apparently we're supposed to just believe the Red God is literally a god. Nothing else is revealed there. And yet this god, who's capable of kind of coordinating information across the whole globe and moving people into position and doing all these things, this god sent one person, sent one magician, however you want to put it, to help out at this battle. Not 10, not 5. So this Red God controls enormous temples in Essos, as has been revealed even on the TV show, and we know this in the books too, of course. And this God that there's nothing else, there's no plot twist. This God isn't someone like Bran, telepathically manipulating people. This God isn't someone like Marwyn the Mage. Marwyn the Mage is a person only in the books. This isn't a case where, like the Wizard of Oz, in the end, somebody is revealed being behind the curtain, or it's all revealed to have been, religious enthusiasm that wasn't based on... No. Apparently we're supposed to believe, no, just these supernatural gods are real and exist and manipulate history and circumstances and manipulate people's position, and yet are so weak and powerless that the best they could do, the most impact this religion of the Red God could have, was having one person in the right place at the right time. Not 2, not 5, not an army, no. And apparently also the God now, the Red God, has no interest in all the things that Stannis Baratheon was fighting for. He has no interest in burning down the idols of the Seven. He has no interest in spreading his own religion in Westeros. All of those agendas, all of those themes that, again, were set up in the first 3 seasons of the show quite seriously. We get the sense right at the beginning of the TV show, hey, guess what? A major side in this war is a side that's trying to convert this continent to a new religion, that wants to burn the statues of the old religion, that wants to burn all the people who believe in the old religion. Nope, all that's forgotten. Just brotherhood among men, and this huge, enormous, convoluted plot, including Stannis' army, and the complete destruction of Stannis' army, completely disappeared. That'll happen to put one person at Winterfell in the right place at the right time. Not 5, not 10. I don't think George R.R. Martin is capable of a lapse in the quality of his writing that bad. And I do not think George R.R. Martin is capable of presenting us a story that consists of life and hope triumphing over death and evil, and characters and motivations who are evil simply for the sake of being evil. So look, guys, in some ways, you may regard this episode as a masterpiece, as a triumph of special effects and action film photography. That's how you feel about it? Fine. On another level, this episode cements, or is the final disappointment. It's the final letdown in that the TV show has simply lost all interest in completing any of the storylines, any of the plots, any of the thematic philosophical questions that were first asked in seasons 1, 2, and 3.